Great. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming. This begins the recording and today's session for the New Jersey Federation of Democratic Women. I'm so glad to have you all here on the last Wednesday of the month, which also happens to be the last day of the month of June, which is the fantastic Pride Month. So just want to take a moment to recognize that. Also take a moment to recognize that Assemblywoman Timberlake had a family emergency. So if we could all keep her in our thoughts and prayers. Her amazing Chief of Staff, Medina Muhammad, is here with us today. And so she will be representing quite capably the Assemblywoman. So we're super glad to have her and the office represented. For those of you who don't know, my name is Alana Berman. I'm the president of the New Jersey Federation of Democratic Women, and I'm joined by several members of my absolutely fantastic executive board, who I couldn't do half as much that I do without them. And they really do more than pull their weight together when it comes to putting this programming on. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that. And then without much more ado, I am going to turn it over to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I believe I asked you, Rachel, if you could please lead that, correct?
Yes, you did. Absolutely. Everyone, if you would kind of, I guess, turn towards the flag that's in your house, wherever it is, and we'll begin. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you so much. And so with that being said, I am going to throw it over to Roberta.
Hi, and good evening, everybody. I'm Roberta Walters, and I am so thrilled to be hosting, along with the board, this wonderful event this evening. So what I'd like to do is take a quick moment to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers. We have several questions that our speakers are going to discuss around, really around women's health. This has been in the news a lot, and this is a huge topic, I think, to everyone on this call. So it's so important that we bring everybody together and we talk through some really critical items. So obviously our wonderful friend, Assemblywoman Brittany Timberlake, could not be here with us. Medina is absolutely wonderful. She is Brittany's, or Assemblywoman Timberlake's, excuse me, Chief of Staff, and she is my emerged sister, class of 19. So thank you. A little bit about the Assemblywoman, though. She represents the 34th Legislative District since January of 2018, when she was sworn in to replace Sheila Oliver, who took the role of Lieutenant Governor. Assemblywoman Timberlake has served as freeholder president of the Essex County Board of Chosen Freeholders, where she was at the time the state's only African-American woman to serve as a freeholder. Sarah Best is the Deputy Director of Legislative and Political Affairs at Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey. She grew up in New Jersey and studied at the University of Pittsburgh, and then began her career advocating on behalf of Planned Parenthood in Delaware. Caitlin, excuse me, Wojtowicz, hopefully I did not butcher that too bad. Thank you, Caitlin. She is the Vice President of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey. She studied at TCNJ in Rutgers and began her career working in sex education before joining Planned Parenthood in 2017. And Jamila Smith, we're so happy to have Jamila join us. She is a project manager and trainer with Garden State Equality. Jamila's work in advocacy started during her undergrad years at Hofstra, where she majored in sociology with minors in psychology and women's studies. She became a member of the Pride Network, which is the LGBT organization on campus. Jamila is passionate about mental health and wellness, women's empowerment, social emotional learning, literacy, nutrition, and community activism. So please welcome all of our wonderful speakers, and thank you all for joining us. So we have a couple of questions, and what we'll do is we will round table for some questions. Some questions are specific to our guests this evening, and I will call those out as we go through it. We will go in order. So Medina, you will go first, representing Assemblywoman Timberlake, Sarah, Caitlin, and Jamila in that order. So the first question is for all of our panelists, and it's really a simple one. Hopefully it's a simple one, but what are the biggest health issues that are facing women today? Medina?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. I would say on behalf of the Assemblywoman, because we as women deal with so much, constantly giving ourselves in all of the spaces that we enter, I would say the most impactful and at the forefront part of our health is our mental health. It's a part of our overall health and wellness, but it's often neglected. And it's a major issue that we often don't think about until we truly need assistance. We as women often, we pour into so many others, but we neglect ourselves in many ways. And that can truly weigh on a person, especially during a pandemic where no one, could have predicted the circumstances that we are in today, including just everyday happenings from work or the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, or facing tough times that this pandemic has created. Those are all crucial in our life. And I believe mental health, which is a key contributor to our overall health and wellness, is a major issue we as women face today.
Thank you. Sarah, same question. What is the biggest health issues that you see facing women today?
Thanks, Roberta, and thank you for having us here tonight. I'm really excited to get to talk with you all about this topic. So I think in my role, I focus a lot on legislation and policy, so I'm kind of going to bring that lens a little bit to this question. So I think that right now, one of the biggest issues that we're seeing in reproductive health is access to care. And so really that spans the gamut from, is there public transportation where you live to be able to get the care that you need at a center that's close to where you live? Do you have adequate health insurance that you're not paying huge sums out of pocket to be able to access essential health care? So I think all of these things are really important, and some of the biggest barriers that we see to people accessing the care that they know that they need. So I'd say that the biggest issue, facing a lot of people is being able to access this reproductive health care.
Thanks, Sarah. Caitlin, same question to you, please.
Well, thank you, Roberta, and thank you all for having us here tonight. And I just want to, one, thank Medina being here on behalf of the Assemblywoman, who is a true champion of reproductive health care and has been a staunch steward of this work, and just really appreciate her work. And I know she couldn't be here tonight, but please pass along our thanks to her from Planned Parenthood. I will double down on what Sarah said, and that we have seen, the governor signed his budget or signed the budget for fiscal year 2022 recently. And in there was a fund that provides care for folks who would be eligible for Medicaid if they were not ineligible because of their immigration status. It was previously called the Supplemental Prenatal Care Program, and is now called the Reproductive Health Care Program. And we're really proud of that because it has been expanded to include not just prenatal care and essential and emergency services for folks who are giving birth, but to include birth control. And we are really looking forward to that fund being further expanded when we pass the Reproductive Freedom Act, which hopefully folks know about, S3030, A4848. We are working to pass that. Yes, Medina, thank you for the claps. I appreciate that. We are hoping to pass that sooner than later, hopefully in lame duck, because then that fund will be further expanded to include abortion care. Not only will that bill ensure that everyone in New Jersey has the right to reproductive health care, not just abortion, I have to say, not just abortion, but full reproductive autonomy, so they can make the full reproductive health care choices that are right for them, their families, and allow them to thrive and have their communities live with the full dignity that they all deserve. But it will also expand access by removing barriers like Sarah, my colleague, broke down earlier in her remarks. But this fund will also be expanded to include that folks can get their prenatal care, their birth control, and their abortion access. So no matter what reproductive options they choose, they have access to. And so we're really proud of this bill. And I think this is really one of the hallmarks of what we can do to include, to ensure that everyone has access to what they need and deserve.
Thanks, Caitlin. And Jamila, same
I
question
was,
to you.
I was just going to piggyback on what everyone else was saying, but I think that mental health and access to care really are the top two, as the top two priorities. One, really just like recognizing the importance of mental health, and then also being brave enough to admit and face those struggles. I feel like a lot of women oftentimes, again, are afraid to speak out about their mental health concerns because of the stigma and just the idea of women needing to be strong and needing to be mothers or needing to be caretakers or just all of the other roles that we take on as women. So I think that's super important of mental health, but then also feeling brave enough to even advocate for oneself, which is a big struggle that I know that a lot of people face. I know myself specifically could speak to that. And then also really just access to care, especially within Brown and Black communities, and having those resources available for Black and Brown women, especially who we know, face more times than not face poverty and just being underinsured or uninsured, and that lack of care and lack of access really does play into the options that they have. So I think those two are really, again, at the forefront of our concerns, or should be.
Thanks, Jamila. Okay, the next question, and we'll start back with Medina. Medina, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions regarding women's health care, and how would you address it, or how would the Assemblywoman address it around addressing those misconceptions?
I think what Jamila said kind of hits the nail on the head. It's a simple misconception, but often overlooked, is that when women or someone who identifies as a woman expresses their needs, that they're supposed to be met. But as we all know, and as statistics indicate, that women constantly have to advocate for themselves and for their health, and for the quality of the healthcare that they receive, because things constantly change. And that's probably the biggest issue that's in present day as well, as we see now with the Reproductive Freedom Act. The reason we even need that is because the constant change that exists when it comes to women's access to healthcare. So I think that's the biggest misconception, and then that security in advocating for oneself. I think the best way to create a solution is to create a safe space where anyone, any person can speak up and be heard, and their voices are valued, that they won't have to ask multiple times for things, especially Black and Brown women, as disparities show that Black and Brown communities are often at an even more of a disparity because of their access and their limited access. So I think that's the greatest misconception.
Thank you. Sarah, same question to you. The biggest misconception that you've seen regarding women's health, and how do we address it?
Yeah, and I think on the policy level, I would say like that we're good here in New Jersey, that we're all set, that, like we don't need to be dreaming bigger and bolder about what we can do here in the state to improve access to reproductive health and to, make the lives of people here better. I think here in New Jersey, we have a strong and proud tradition of passing really great policy when it comes to reproductive health care. I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but with family planning funding and some of the changes we've made in our sex education regulations, we have a history of doing really great things, especially in our recent history for reproductive health. But I think that doesn't mean we should settle there, and that there's always room for us to be dreaming bigger and making sure that we are not leaving anybody behind, because I think that there's also something that we do need to strive for in the reproductive health movement, to make sure that we're approaching this with an intersectional lens, and making sure that as we're moving policy and community events and action forward, that we're not leaving anyone behind. So yeah, that's what I would say, that we're good here in New Jersey, and we can't continue to improve.
Excellent, thank you. Caitlin, same question.
Yeah, I just want to double down on what Medina and Sarah both lifted up, and I'm sure Jamila will also say the same thing, which is that if we're talking about healthcare and reproductive healthcare, that women's healthcare is a very essential part of this conversation, but we need to be centering pregnant people, or people who can give birth, or people who are birthing folks. And we need to not leave behind or alienate those folks who are not cisgender women who are in this conversation. There are many folks who can give birth and can become pregnant, and who will be giving birth in the state, that are not heterosexual cisgender white women. And we also need to make sure that we're taking care of those folks. And to Sarah's point, we really took an intersectional approach to the Reproductive Freedom Act, which is that we ensured the right for everyone, regardless of gender identity, to have access to reproductive health care. And that was really important for us, that we weren't gendered in our approach to that, because we know that there are folks who don't identify as women who can give birth, who can become pregnant, who need access to birth control. And we want to ensure that their rights were protected just as much as anyone else. And so I think that's a really key part of this. And so just appreciate you lifting this up, Roberta, and to Medina and Sarah for also touching upon that.
Thanks, Caitlin. And Jamila, same question. The biggest misconception in women's health?
I think the biggest misconception is that access is global, specific within the US, just making the assumption that everyone has the same rights and same access, and we all obviously know and are privileged to know that that's not the case. I think that there's a privilege that we have, especially just being on the East Coast, where healthcare and access to healthcare may just look completely different. And so our lens needs to be bigger, and the vision needs to be bigger, because again, when we're centering it just around, again, cisgender women, it kind of leaves out a bunch of people with diverse backgrounds. So really just putting and having that intersectional lens when we're talking about the support of women's health, it just needs to be more intersectional. When we talk about policy, when we talk about access, really, who are we thinking of outside of ourselves, if that makes sense? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And then I also think that just the assumption that everyone has the same knowledge and resources about this stuff, about education, about access. I feel like there's assumption and privilege that everyone's educated on these things, or we all should know what women's health issues are. But there are some people in places where they have no idea, and these may be the first conversations that they're starting to have, especially in the times of COVID, when we're thinking and having healthcare as our main focal point. So it's something I also think as well should be highlighted, and it's also a misconception. So
absolutely. Absolutely, thank you. I want to change it up a little bit. We have some specific questions for each of you and your respective expertise. So I want to go ahead and ask those first, and then welcome any other member of the panel if they want to add any additional comments. So Medina, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. And this question was written for the Assemblywoman. So I'm going to ask it to you like I would ask it to her. And then see how you want to answer it. So the question is what has been your biggest challenges as a legislator in this area? And what are some of your proudest achievements?
Okay, so I'll just talk, I guess, from the Assemblywoman's perspective. But I would say just reflecting on the Assemblywoman's goals and accomplishments and challenges. Probably the greatest challenge in this space in women's health is constantly having to reiterate the point that a woman's body and her choices do not belong in the boardroom or a committee room or a courtroom. And as many of you may know, the Assemblywoman was sworn into office while she was 9 months pregnant. And in addition to that, has since given birth to another child. So as not only a mother, but a leader and a woman who happens to be a legislator, advocating for policies that are needed and being that voice for women in healthcare is kind of second to none, because it is something that she has lived, and many of the policies that she creates are lived experiences. So I would say the greatest challenge is reiterating that very point that a woman's body should be her own choice, and that choice does not belong in those very spaces. And then when it comes to triumphs, I would say in terms of policy, as I mentioned, the Assemblywoman uses her own experiences and that of many others and advocacy groups like Planned Parenthood to create policies that impact real families, real lives, to increase awareness, to enact concrete quality changes and fix long-time issues. For example, I'll give you an example. The Assemblywoman has a bill that requires doctors to tell women who are expecting all of their options before they give birth. And that seems like something that doctors should already be doing, but it doesn't happen. And so oftentimes we see mothers go into the delivery room and, they may have this plan and others may not. Others may not even know that there are other options available to them. So simple things like this that make such a great change in a woman's life, that can save a woman's life, especially with New Jersey's statistics for high infant mortality and maternal mortality rates. So I would say those are the greatest triumphs, just creating long-term, long-lasting, well thought out, comprehensive legislation that changes lives.
Thank you so much, Medina. Any additional comments from any of our other panelists? I know it was very specific to legislation, and we're about to get into a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. So Caitlin and Sarah, this next question is for both of you. And it is, what is the status of the RFA? And why is it so important? And we've mentioned it a few times, and perhaps there may be some in our audience who may not be as familiar. So Sarah, maybe if you could start us off by just giving us a little overview of what the RFA is, and then let us know kind of what the status is and why it's so important. Yeah,
absolutely. So I know Caitlin talked a little bit about this earlier, but the Reproductive Freedom Act, S3030, and the Assembly Bill numbers A4848 is a piece of legislation that was introduced in October of 2020 that seeks to protect and expand access to the broader range of reproductive health. So that includes contraception, pregnancy-related care, and also abortion. And so the way that the Reproductive Freedom Act does this is in three main ways. So one, it codifies the right to access this care here in New Jersey in our state law. We actually don't have this written in our state law. It's our protections for abortion come through case law. And so I'm sure Caitlin might talk about this and why this is so important right now, but with everything happening at the Supreme Court, it's really critical that we take action now to protect the right to reproductive health care and abortion here in New Jersey. And then it tackles some of those access pieces by one, removing financial barriers. So by mandating insurance coverage for abortion and contraception, also the supplemental prenatal program, now the reproductive health care fund that Caitlin mentioned before. And then the last piece of the bill, it tears down some barriers that exist as regulations at the Board of Medical Examiners. And so some of these regulations dictate who can provide abortion and where it can be provided. And we know that these regulations are typically things that we see in more hostile states towards reproductive health care. And really, they're not, scientifically, or they're medically unnecessary and, really don't serve to protect a patient. It really just gets in the way of them accessing the care that they need. So as a whole, this bill really just works to protect access to care and then expand that access so that, we're not saying that this is just a right that only a few people can access, only certain people in the state can access. So I'll leave it to Caitlin to talk a little bit about where the bill is and why it's so important.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, and thank you, Roberta, for raising this, and Sarah, that was such a comprehensive overview of the bill. And one of the things I just want to double down on is that, again, we are super proud of this bill because it does not just protect people who identify as women, but it says that everyone has access to reproductive health care. And so we are protecting everyone, regardless of gender identity, so that they can access the care that they need and deserve and should have the right to. And so we're really, really proud of that. And that is that's going further than a lot of places in the United States, other state legislatures. So we're really proud of that. Where is the bill? It is stalled. And so we are happy to have all of you on this call tonight to help us advocate to get it moving. I want to thank Medina to be here on behalf of Assemblywoman Brittany Timberlake, who is a champion, a true champion of reproductive health care and this bill. We have, I think it's 28 now. Sarah can correct me if I'm in 28. She's nodding her head. Yes, thank you. 28 members in the assembly who are signed on as co-sponsors. That's over half of the pro-sexual and reproductive health care majority. So we know that this bill has broad support. We know that this bill is popular. We have polling that says that the people of New Jersey support not only abortion access, but this bill specifically. This is not a controversial topic. People think it is not. People in New Jersey want access to reproductive health care. They want access to abortion. They want access to birth control. And so the sooner we pass this, the better we off are in New Jersey, especially with the threats at the Supreme Court, which Sarah and Roberta, you basically talked about. There's a case before the Supreme Court that will be heard and decided sometime in the fall that could overturn or further dismantle Roe versus Wade. And we can't take a wait and see approach here in New Jersey. We need to pass the RFA so that we can protect access here right now. So for folks who are looking for an action item, I will push you to ppactionnj.org, which is our website. We have an action alert. You can call the Senate President, you can call the Speaker, ask them to move the bill sooner than later. We know that folks are taking a break right now. It is the summer. I would like to go to the beach too. I totally get that. No hate there. But we want this bill to be passed before this session ends in January and the new legislature is sworn in. So we really need to make sure that that happens. Least if not because Senator Weinberg, who is the prime sponsor, will be retiring, and she has been a true champion, and we want to make this part of her legacy. So I hope everyone who is watching tonight, everyone who is here, will take action and encourage our legislative leadership to move this bill.
Thank you, Caitlin. Jamila, the next question is for you, please. And we want to talk about LGBTQ health, specifically transgender health. This has been something that has really been in the news lately. We've been hearing a lot more about it. So a couple little different parts on this question. So the first part is, what are some of the biggest issues that are facing women and those who identify as women? Is the first part of the question. And then the second part is, where are we seeing improvements and where are we still lacking?
Okay, great question, great question. I pretty much am going to bring it back to access because I think that's one of the biggest concerns for LGBTQ people, but specifically with trans women is access to care. Again, a lot of trans women specifically, but LGBTQ people in general are either uninsured or underinsured. So that really does play a part in their ability to access care. And for the ones that do or are able to access care, there's still a lot to put into consideration when seeking support in healthcare. One being obviously discrimination and the fear of being discriminated against. Another really is having a team of people, specifically doctors and nurses, who are culturally competent and educated about trans issues, trans women's issues specifically. I feel like that is one of the biggest struggles because even if they are seeking care, there are doctors and nurses, unfortunately, who still don't have the knowledge and still don't have the language to really kind of support and affirm trans people's identities. So I think that's the biggest barrier. And then just knowledge about what they should be, what care they even need, what cares and supports they really need. That is a big number of people and a big number of trans people often report saying that they are really sure about what their specific healthcare concerns are. So that is also just the knowledge is really, or lack of is really one of the biggest barriers. But some of the things that we're kind of seeing is really just starting from the ground up. So providing resources for those that are low income to have discounts. And it also helps with for young people as well. There's a lot of resources out there for young trans people when seeking medical support. But I think that for those that are older, there is still lack of awareness as to what supports and resources are out there for them. So I would say that's the biggest challenge or concern. But I do think something that's been worked upon or we're seeing improvements is healthcare workers' willingness and openness to learning more and to being educated on better ways to support and affirm their clients. So I think that is where we're seeing improvements of just those healthcare workers seeking out knowledge, seeking out best practices, either from organizations like GSC, but also other healthcare providers who have a bit more information and ways to support trans people. So there's some work that's being done, so we're making strides, and I think education is obviously always the biggest part because once they're educated, they feel safe enough and equipped enough to kind of help and support trans people that are seeking care. So we've got a long way to go, but we are making strides and they're making strides and they're making efforts. Obviously, that's just a piece of the puzzle. The biggest piece really is, again, the financial piece and their ability to even access care and to know how to go about that. So there's still more work to be done around that area. But there's things like SOGI, which is the sexual orientation and gender identity data like collection. So it's helping healthcare workers just learn more about their patients and their clients so that they're using inclusive language when engaging with them and, you know, knowing the best practices and ways to really support them as they seek out care. So it's steps.
Well, and just kind of a follow-up, and this is just a personal follow-up that I wanted to ask. Two parts. So the first part is, how does New Jersey rank among the states in care for LGBTQ as well as for transgender individuals? And then the second part is, are there anything specific that Garden State Equality is doing outside of what you've been talking through tonight that is really laser focused on that work, or have you sort of covered a lot of the programs that are out there?
The first part I actually can't answer. I'm still very, very new to this role, so forgive me for not knowing all of yes, everything. But I do think that we are making strides, especially when partnering with places like hospitals and healthcare facilities to really just educate. That's part of like my work, is doing the workshop pieces, the project management stuff, to really make sure that healthcare workers are kind of equipped to know how to support their clients, and they're able to just have space to ask questions that might seem a bit controversial or that they might not know or might be afraid to ask. And then just helping them figure out best practices too, in terms of working to make their facilities more inclusive, more diverse. So that's kind of like our part that we're playing in assisting healthcare workers in that area. I hope that answers some part of the question, and my apologies.
It does. No, it does. Absolutely. No, thank you. And you actually had said something in your previous answer that was a pretty good segue. So I'm going to go back to round robin questions. And Medina, I'm going to start back with you. And again, from the Assemblywoman's thoughts here, we're about almost for the last 4 years with Governor Murphy as governor. So what are some of the most positive and maybe negative changes that you've seen under Governor Murphy? And what are some of the budget wins that you've seen that have really related to women's health and the improvement of women's health?
Yeah, so in this short amount of time, I will say Governor Phil Murphy and First Lady Tammy Murphy have both done a great job at seeing the needs in our state, the inadequacies, and filling them, and not just through legislation. The governor has obviously supported and signed many bills into law to support these initiatives, but also not only supporting those through legislation, but funding those very efforts. And just in reflecting on the governor's term and how this term has been characterized by the opposite conflicting leadership at the federal level, I have to applaud our governor for being able to be proactive and also positively reactive to the things that came down at the federal level. Think about how our previous president was very much into not supporting Planned Parenthood or not funding Planned Parenthood. And our governor stepped into action and said, not here, not New Jersey, and took a leap and funded those initiatives so that our state would not be impacted. And that's true leadership. Think about how our First Lady Tammy Murphy also, took the statistics that came about the infant mortality rates and said, this is an issue and I'm going to create a solution to this issue, and has been advocating for change since. So I will say these few years have been pretty successful, and hopefully moving forward, there will be further success so that our state can continue to progress and lead the way. And be an example to other states, because other states look to our state and mirror many of the policies we enact. States like California, our neighbors in New York, they follow along in the same trajectory that we take. So I think that our governor's leadership in that way definitely sets a tone that's hard to match.
Thanks, Medina. Sarah, same question to you.
Yeah, and 100% agree with everything Medina was saying. I think that really the last 4 years, I think we've seen New Jersey stepping up in some really important ways for reproductive health. I mean, family planning funding is just one of the key ways. And Roberta, I know you're very involved in this fight, so you know as well as anyone. But I think the last administration we saw cutting family planning funding, and Governor Murphy's first bill that he signed 4 years ago was to restore family planning funding to health centers across the state. So I think that's one of the key, wins over the last 4 years. And I think what I've been really impressed with is that it hasn't stopped there. So, when some of the federal attacks on the Title X program that Medina was alluding to, and defunding Planned Parenthood at the federal level through Title X, really New Jersey stood up, and along with Governor Murphy and legislative leaders like Assemblywoman Timberlake and others, really stood up to make sure that that's not how we operate here in New Jersey, and we're going to make sure that we're standing up for the people of this state. And I think that the budget that was signed yesterday too reflects that as well. And there's a lot of other really amazing things in there too when it comes to reproductive health. Medicaid 365 postpartum, which is a huge win. So coverage for, after someone gives birth, they'd be able to utilize Medicaid coverage for 365 days, as opposed to 60, which was what it was before. And a plethora of other things. But I think really just New Jersey standing up and really taking a lead on reproductive health over the last 4 years has been incredibly refreshing. Even looking at what is happening nationally, we're definitely taking a lead and taking a stand.
Thank you, Sarah. Caitlin, I don't know, that's going to be a hard one to follow, right?
It is. I really just want to double down on what Sarah and Medina said, which is that New Jersey continues to be a leader and to stand up for folks when it comes to reproductive health care. I am so proud to be a native of the state, and my personal joke, which you will all get to hear now, is that I love this state so much I named my dog after it. So my dog's name is Jersey Girl. So it's a hallmark of how much I love and care for the state that I named my dog after it. But it's also a hallmark of how much we care for each other in the state. Like, I think our true value of New Jersey is that we take care of each other. We have this sort of reputation of being gruff and unkind or rude, but that's not really what New Jersey is about. We really take care of each other and we stand up for one another. And that's what this budget says, is that we are here to take care of folks. That's what the RFA is about. That's what family planning is about. We're here to take care of one another. And I'm so proud to be part of the state. And so that's just what I want to leave you all with tonight.
And Jamila, same question to you about the changes over the last 4 years with Governor Murphy and any budget wins that have impacted your organization.
I think the Senior Bill of Rights has been the biggest one that we've been talking about. And we personally work a lot with older adults. And so just making sure that they are feeling safe, feeling affirmed, and feeling like they can really grow and thrive in their identity is something that we didn't see coming. So it's great that this bill has been passed, because it really does. We oftentimes don't even really think about the older population of LGBTQ folks specifically. So this bill really does kind of lift them up and lift up their voices to let them know that we see you and that you aren't, people that we're discarding. You're still a part of this community, and you should feel safe and respected wherever you are, and your identity should be respected in the same way. So I think that's been the biggest win for us that we like to highlight when having these conversations.
Thank you. All right. So before we prepare to wrap up, I have one last question. Well, actually two last questions, but this one is the last of our formal questions. So I'm going to give you each 30 seconds and ask the question of, and we'll start with you, Medina. What is your one big ask if you could have anything related to women's health? So if I am a genie and I wave my magic wand, what would be the one big ask you would want?
I would believe the Assemblywoman would say healthcare that is accessible, affordable, stigma-free, and universal.
That's wonderful. That's
Okay.
great. I think we all want that. Absolutely. Sarah, same question to you. What is your one big ask related to women's health?
I think the Reproductive Freedom Act, but I'll add to that. I think one thing that we've all kind of been talking about tonight is just tell your story. I think it's important that we all talk about it. I think it's a step that we all can take to stigma-free healthcare is just, you know, talking openly with friends, family, loved ones about reproductive health care.
Thank you. Caitlin, your one big ask.
Well, first, I just want to give like big snaps to Medina. I was snapping at your answer for sure. And both to Sarah, like the Reproductive Freedom Act is really about expanding access, not just protecting access, but expanding access, which we are really, really passionate about at Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey. But I also will just say that, and perhaps Jamila might expand upon this and has throughout this conversation tonight, is that it's not just about women's healthcare, it's about reproductive healthcare more broadly. And we want to protect access for folks, for birthing folks, for folks who can become pregnant. We want to really expand this definition. And so I guess if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to allow folks to expand their definition of what reproductive healthcare looks like and understand that it's not just female-bodied folks or folks with a uterus who can become, it's folks with a uterus who can become pregnant, but it's not just women who can become pregnant, and that we need to expand our definition to allow for a more expansive concept of what it looks like to give birth or become pregnant, and also support those birthing folks in their journey.
Thank you so much. And Jamila, what is your one big ask for women's health?
My one big ask, I don't even know how I would point this to, because I guess this could be a two, I don't even know. But
just
I would
go ahead, just say it.
Continuing to share our experiences with each other, but also really just feeling equipped enough to advocate for ourselves. When it comes to policy, when it comes to just our personal experiences, especially with the medical system, I feel oftentimes that we are not heard or listened to enough. And oftentimes we kind of get silenced, or we don't feel like we're being believed, or we don't feel like we're being heard. So it's really just like being loud and like being unapologetic about our health and our concerns and our pain and et cetera, because I feel like we are oftentimes kind of disregarded, and that influences our livelihoods, and it influences our health. It influences our health, and it influences our outcomes. So just keep advocating, keep being loud about it. You know, don't stop fighting, because our livelihoods depend on it. So that's for us, that's for everyone out there, that's for, you know, medical providers who are here on this call, if there are any, to really just advocate and also listen to women. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So before we let our panel go, or we open it up, we may have a few minutes for questions. I always like to close these panels with a final question. And this is sort of it's kind of a long-winded question, but we tried to kind of roll it all into one. So Medina, we're going to start with you. And this question is what do you want the public to know? about their options or programs out there, anything about you or the community that you would want to share. And then on top of that, what do you think that's being, excuse me, I'm going to say that again. What do you think is too often being unsaid that needs to be said around women's health? And then the third part of the question is why do you think is the biggest hurdle moving forward? I know I just threw everything at you but the kitchen sink. So the first question is, what would you like us to know about programs or efforts or things going on within the community related to women's health?
So the first question, I would say in terms of, for everyone on the meeting and just in general, that your legislators are a great source of information and a resource to advocating for change. So reach out to us. We do read those emails. We do read those letters. So if you reach out to us, we do take those seriously. So if you have ideas, we take those into account because every experience is valued. And what were the other two questions? Sorry.
The next one is what is too often being unsaid that really does need to be said around women's health?
What is often unsaid?
Yep.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, or we could talk about some of the biggest hurdles moving forward and how allies can help.
Yeah, I think Jamila's point was the most significant, I would say, is being an advocate for yourself and also being an advocate for someone else. Oftentimes we don't know how to approach being an advocate for ourselves because we often think of our doctors, they went to school for this, they're the experts, but we too know our bodies more than our doctors. So we have to speak up for ourselves. So I think that's often unsaid and pretty unorthodox, but it is needed because without it, so many things wouldn't happen or could happen. And what was the last part? Sorry.
And that was the last one.
Okay.
That was the last part.
Okay.
I know it's a tough question. I should have rewrote it a little better on that one. So Sarah, to you, the next question around, what first part of the first question is what would you want the public to know about options, programs, or things that are available to them in the community?
So I think in terms of advocating on behalf of reproductive health, I would say there are so many opportunities for you to get involved. I know Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey has lots of opportunities for you to make your voice heard, and the website that Caitlin mentioned earlier, and I can drop it in the chat, is a great place to start. But there's also many other organizations, Garden State Equality, the Thrive Coalition, which is a huge coalition with 60 plus organizations that you could get involved with. So there's lots of ways to get involved. And I think to some of the other questions in this question, I think just as Medina said, as Jamila said, make your voice heard. This is really important and really critical. And I think right now is the moment. I think there's a lot happening at the national level with the Supreme Court. There's a lot of movement and a lot of conversation about this topic. So I think now's a great time to get involved. So I think that's what I would say.
And what about some of the biggest hurdles moving forward? How can allies help break down some of those hurdles?
I think some of the biggest hurdles probably would just be getting the word out. I think that's what we've kind of been talking about today, is the stigma around talking about reproductive health care. So I think as much as you can be vocal and be bold about about this topic and about reproductive health care and abortion and birth control, I think that really just helps us all kind of move forward and make this a less stigma inducing topic to talk about for some people. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Caitlin, first part for you. What would you like the public to know about their options, programs that are available out there within the community?
Yeah, the first thing I would just say is that abortion is healthcare. Just to double down on what Sarah was speaking about, is like abortion is healthcare. It is a medical service. We should not feel shame around it. I know there is shame around it. I know that there's a lot of unpacking for us to do as a society and as a community around accessing abortion, but it's healthcare. It's a medical service, and I want everyone to hear that loud and proud. And if you need to access that service, you're accessing healthcare. And I'm so proud of an organization that is working to break down that stigma. Similarly, at Planned Parenthood, Action Out of New Jersey, we obviously advocate on behalf of our affiliates who actually provide the healthcare. I'm not a doctor. I'm here to advocate on behalf of our doctors and talk about all the wonderful things that we provide. But we've also seen a really big surge in STD rates in New Jersey, not just under Governor Christie when he was the former governor and there was a closure of health centers and cutting of funding, but we've seen a real surge in syphilis in particular. So I hope folks know that at most Planned Parenthood health centers, most in New Jersey, there is free access to testing. So please check out our website or send folks to them. We always have sliding scale fees. So if you cannot afford it, our health centers work with folks to make sure that they can get the care they need. We never turn anyone away, and I want folks to hear that too. But syphilis is making a big comeback, and we are treating that and testing for it. And I want folks to hear that too, is that reproductive health care is more than just birth control. It's more than just STD testing for women or women identified folks. It is a broad range of reproductive health care, and we want folks to come to us for that. So, yeah.
Thanks, Caitlin. And I think you hit the hurdles as well. So thank you. I think you got both parts of the question. And Jamila, to help close us out this evening, what are some of the things that you would like the community to know about programs or options or things that are available to them? And subsequently, what are some of the hurdles that you've seen and how can allies help?
I'm going to probably ask you to repeat that question the second part again, because I'm going to forget it. But the first part, I would say, I think, and just echoing off of what Medina had said, is really just like reaching out to legislators, but specifically just being more willing to be involved with community programs and projects that are happening. I feel like oftentimes we kind of leave our lives up to people bigger than us. And oftentimes there's so many ways to impact change, especially like with Planned Parenthood and through legislative change to, again, enact change in their community. So I think there's a lot of power in local politics and local community programs to support women, to support LGBTQ people, and plus. So I think I would say that. And then you said misconceptions
around hurdles, breaking down the hurdles that are out there. How can allies help with breaking down the hurdles that are impacting the ability to get healthcare or around healthcare?
I think allies just have more responsibility to sharing resources. I think that's the biggest thing. I know we all have like a wealth of information, and sometimes we're kind of afraid to have certain conversations, or we're not sure if we're equipped to, but I feel like the more you know, like each one teach one as like a motto, you know. Spreading information around is the best place to start, and you never know, maybe one conversation with you or with someone else can really like have an impact on somebody's life. So I would say that. And I had something else to say, but it completely slipped my mind. If I remember it in the next minute or two that we have, I'll circle back.
Absolutely. And I would invite all of our panelists. I see Caitlin, or excuse me, Sarah and Medina put their information in there. Jamila, please put Garden State Equality's information in the chat so that all of our participants today will have, if there's any questions or they want to learn more, they can reach out to you. So I want to thank all of our panelists this evening for a wonderful discussion on what I know is, it's very close to my heart. Women's health and access to health is something that I have fought for my whole life. So I appreciate you all coming and joining us. And Alana, we're going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. That was a really amazing conversation. I am so grateful for all of our guests for sharing such information. I think we had some really amazing discussions going on in the chat as well. I think so many people's eyes were opened to so much new information tonight, and I think it was received really well. So that's great. I just want to thank all of you. You have a partner, an ally, a colleague, and a resource in us. And we're so grateful to have that in all of you here tonight. So thank you. With that being said, we're going to move into and transition into our June 30th, 2021 business meeting portion. At this point, I'm just going to take a couple seconds, turn off the recording, say goodnight to all of our special guests, and encourage all of our members to turn on their cameras, unmute themselves if they wish, but also allow us to have a meeting.